Hey guys, it's John. You've heard me talk about the men's retreat up in the Adirondack Mountains from September 25th through the 28th. There's actually 2 tracks. So if you want to come the 26th, there's another track that's a little less expensive, but it's going to be a good time, whether you do track 1 or 2. And if you haven't signed up yet, you're going to want to do it because when we are full, we're full, and you're not going to be able to get in. So sign up soon. See you there. musicandmasculinity.com. God bless.
And we are live on the Conversations That Matter podcast. I'm your host, John Harris, and you are going to want to sign up if you are a guy and you are anywhere in the vicinity of the Northwest or Mid-Atlantic states. In fact, we have people coming from the Midwest and South as well because they love it so much. You're going to want to come to our men's retreat this year. It's only a few weeks away, so time is ticking, and there is still availability, though. So sign up. Go to musicandmasculinity.com. Best men's retreat east of the Rocky Mountains. I don't claim west of the Rocky, but I do claim east of the Rocky. So that is coming up, and we're excited for that. More details at musicandmasculinity.com. There's a lot of news to get to today. It's kind of hard to choose which stories to focus on, but this is Conversations That Matter, right? So I have curated for myself what I think are important news stories to think through. And I wanted to start here. I wanted to start with a situation that took place over the weekend regarding a murder. And it seems like what's happened with this murder that took place in Charlotte, North Carolina, it has opened up a discussion that is ongoing and I believe will intensify. I don't think the discussion is going away. We are going to, for years to come, be talking about violence, especially when it comes to violence emanating from certain racial groups and what accounts for the level of violence that come from certain racial groups, racial minority groups in particular. Obviously, illegal migrants have been part of this discussion, but more broadly speaking, Black people in this country, the descendants of slaves, and I would include those who have assimilated into that culture, who have come since the times of slavery. That particular culture receives a lot of scrutiny, and it's from both the left and the right. The left wants to say the reason for this is deprivation from years ago, from the days of segregation and from the days of slavery. If we didn't have those experiences, you wouldn't have this level of crime. There's you could say a spectrum, we'll say, on the right that analyzes this and says, hold on a minute, look at places like Canada that don't have those same experiences, and you have the same kinds of situation. You have crime. You have the crime at basically the same levels in that population. Look at certain African countries. Now, there are differences, by the way. This episode really wasn't for this particular purpose, so I didn't get a list together. But there are places, I know, and they might be smaller places, but there are places, for example, there's certain islands in the Caribbean that have very high Black populations and have very low crime rates. So you have to get into each particular all the cultural factors in each particular situation to find out, okay, why does it look this way here and not there? I actually pointed out many times during the great riots of 2020 that most of the violence seemed to be in the North, and yet we ripped down hundreds of these Confederate Southern statues. And not just that, we ripped down Christopher Columbus statues. We even ripped down some founding father statues, mostly Southerners who had some kind of a connection to the institution of slavery in this country. And I thought it was ironic that most of the violence, though, was in the North. The place that you saw cities actually burning down were in northern areas. The closest you came to violence in the South was probably in Atlanta, and it did not compare to cities in the North, like the Twin Cities in Minnesota or even Chicago. So I think there are differences in populations of quote unquote Black people, even in the United States. But obviously we have our crime statistics and there has to be a reason for it. Right. And so I don't shy away from those things. I've been talking about those things for years, and I will tell you what I think. And we don't have time to get into all the details with all the things we're going to talk about today, but I will try to give you somewhat of a solution, what I've thought for years about solving the problem of crime in inner city urban areas. And whether it's people who are Black or people who are, I don't care if they're green or whatever color, the right way to approach this particular situation. We also are going to talk about the PCA today and a situation that happened the Sunday before last at a particular PCA church. It's a wild situation. I'll play you the video, but it's a pastor who decided he was going to convert to the Roman Catholic Church. And as part of his goodbye, he served the Lord's Supper right after making the declaration that he is now a papist. I don't know what to make of that, but there are some, it's a very prominent PCA church, and there happens to be someone who's very prominent in the PCA who serves at the church. And so this has caused somewhat of an uproar. Probably it should be more of an uproar, to be quite honest, because the PCA has shown they have a fighting spirit to go after all manner of quote unquote racism, kinism, and it seems like Christian nationalism. But I don't know why this doesn't register quite as high, but we're going to talk about that. We are going to talk about masculinity in general in this country. There was another example that went viral last week of a man, and I feel bad for him, but I think he did the exact wrong thing. And I understand, I think, why he did it. And I think it's time for a pep talk. We're going to have a pep talk, men, about what your responsibility is to your children, even when it's a Cubs game and the baseball is for your son, you've caught it, and someone else wants it. We're going to have a conversation about what to do in that situation without pointing too many fingers and condemning. But what happened, guys? What happened to the American man? This question we've talked about many times. We're going to talk about it some more. We have some President Trump clips to talk about. We have some Barna polls to talk about that, unfortunately, give us some dismal evidence for the situation in the United States concerning Christianity. And that's most of it. We're going to also get into Jemar Tisby's whole analysis of racially motivated crime and what he thinks should happen. Of course, it's not anything that would be new to you. We went through this in the social justice years, but I think it's good to bring it back up, refresh our minds a little bit. And last but not least, we are going to talk about a clip that I think I've just had it. It's from Candace Owens and who else? There was someone else on the podcast with her. We'll find out in a moment. Anyway, Candace Owens talking about the true history of the United States and the poison pill. I don't know if she mentions the Constitution, but our American ideas, basically in the founding documents, being motivated by Freemasonry. And I think I don't know if I'm just getting in my middle-aged here, a little more rambunctious about these things, but I'm not going to turn a blind eye to it. I'm a little sick of hearing these things. And I know it's mostly on X. Most of you maybe have not heard about the theory that I'm going to show you, but I'm just seeing so many wacky theories out there, and they're popping up on the right, and they're not helpful. And they do make us look kind of silly. And so we'll talk about Freemasonry a little bit. And if you want, we'll do a whole episode on it. But I want to at least respond to this clip. So that's where we're going today. Let us start with this situation. I'm going to read for you a news story about this murder that took place. And we'll use that to launch our discussion about crime and safety in the United States. That's the men's retreat. Sorry, that's the men's retreat video. Good reminder again, though, sign up for the men's retreat if you haven't done so. Here's the New York Post. Now, this story has gotten a lot of press in right-wing circles, especially because it has not received a lot of press in the mainstream media. And there's a question of why. Why is it that the George Floyds of the world get so much press, and this particular story doesn't get hardly any? Well, the New York Post is a bit right-leaning for New York standards, at least. And they did report on it. I noticed today the mainstream media is reporting on it. The AP had a weird headline making Donald Trump the center of the whole thing. And a lot of the mainstream stories, for some reason, do not mention the name of the particular victim in the case, which is another interesting thing, because when it's something that fits the left-wing agenda, the name of the victim is always front and center. But we will tell you the name, and we will talk about what happened. So liberal media and politicians have been accused of staying silent on the savage murder of a young Ukrainian refugee. That makes this even more interesting. It's a Ukrainian refugee. I thought we were supposed to care about them. Well, this Ukrainian refugee was on a train in North Carolina, in Charlotte, and after a career criminal with no fewer than 14 arrests was charged with her murder. And those arrests, by the way, included things like breaking and entering, stealing, assault. It's a long rap sheet, and this person is still on the street, and it's kind of odd that this person isn't in prison already. It doesn't make sense. Why is this person freely roaming around? This person does have some issues with supposedly schizophrenia. Maybe he's just talking to demons. I don't know. He has some very weird ideas, including thinking that this young Ukrainian woman was reading his mind, apparently. But Iryna Zarutska, who's 23, was stabbed to death on a light rail in Charlotte, with horrifying surveillance footage showing the moment the unsuspecting young woman was brutally attacked. Now, this man is sitting behind her. He just stands up and just starts stabbing her in the neck and kills her. And the people around her don't even notice what happened initially because it happened so fast. It was unprovoked. It doesn't seem like she even had time to scream. She just dies right there in cold blood. And this criminal starts walking around the bus. Blood is dripping from his knife. And the name of the criminal is DeCarlos Brown Jr. He's 35, and he's allegedly shown pulling out a pocket knife and getting out of his seat behind Zarutska before the video cuts, just as he prepares to plunge the blade into her. So it's a nasty thing. I obviously have seen the video, like most of you, up until the point where the attack, where this screen is, where the attack begins, and that is censored for obvious reasons. Zarutska is totally unaware of the killer behind her. She's fiddling with her phone. After the killing, the attacker can be seen wandering through the blue train line, dripping blood across the floor as he carries the weapon. Bystanders barely seem to notice that a young woman has been knifed to death right behind them. This is one of the tragic commentaries on our modern life, isn't it? That you have someone who has died, someone who has been murdered. And if you look at this picture, you have this guy's kind of in a daze looking ahead of him. People are probably tired. They're coming home from work, but most people are just looking down, presumably at their phones. And we're so distracted by our technology. Do we even notice what's around us? It's kind of a sad thing. He leaves the train, takes off his bloody hoodie, then calmly awaits for the train to pull into the station before exiting. But in the wake of the monstrous killing, which took place on August 22nd, so this actually the actual incident did take place a while ago, a few weeks ago, but I think the footage was not released until last week. Anyway, mainstream outlets and politicians have stayed silent. Charlotte's Democratic mayor even thanked publications that chose to keep the video from the public. There's a picture of the criminal right there. The video of the heartbreaking attack that took Iryna Zarutska's life is now public. I want to thank our media partners and community members who have chosen not to report or to share the footage out of respect for the family, he said. So here's a picture of the mayor, Mayor Vi Lyles. It's terrible. Representative Brad Knott, a Republican, said this about it. The mayor's refusal to condemn senseless, horrific, and preventable violence is as telling as it is despicable. Violent criminals, regardless of who they are or what they look like, need to be in jail. Lyle's office did not respond immediately. The violence in Charlotte is a microcosm of a national epidemic. Mark Harris from North Carolina, Republican representative, says. Charlotte City Council candidate Edwin P. Beacock posted a video of his nighttime ride on board a light rail train in Charlotte as he called for a crackdown on public transit crime. A week ago, 23-year-old Iryna Zarutska was brutally killed on Charlotte's light rail. Her death is a tragedy. So people are weighing in on this. It's just so preventable. I think that's what's got people riled up. It's so preventable. This could have been stopped. This guy was on the radar of law enforcement for quite some time. He had issues that should have kept him out of society, and yet there he is, and senselessly killing people. Now, I'm not going to show it, but I was a little perturbed that when the mainstream media was not covering this, which was, I think I looked it up last Saturday, there was local media, and there was a local, I believe it was an NBC affiliate, that decided to use social media posts, because sometimes news stories do that, from what appears to be a local activist, a left-wing activist, who didn't blame any of this on evil coming from the human heart. It wasn't the problem of the law enforcement being prevented from actually locking this guy up. It actually had to do with mental health. It was all a mental health issue, which, right, when there's a murder that's to the left wing's advantage in their narrative, it's guns, it's Republicans, it's something else. In this particular case, though, it's mental health, and we just need to raise awareness about mental health. I guess that's the takeaway. I thought, that's ridiculous. And I went to the guy's profile. It was not even someone worth talking about because he had so few followers, but it was someone on Facebook who was a Black Lives Matter activist. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. That's the takeaway. That kind of a narrative would be completely reversed, obviously, if it was a white man and a Black woman, or a white Ukrainian refugee. Actually, I don't even know. Would that play into the rights anti-immigration stuff. I'm not sure, but either way, this didn't fit the narrative, and so they didn't either report on it or they tried to take this odd stance that it's all just mental health and we have mental health problem. That's what caused this. No, sin caused this. Evil caused this. A criminal justice system that's broken in our inner cities caused this. And that's where you can trace all of this back to. So that is the situation. I feel like there was something else that, yes, the Charlotte mayor responds to the deadly light rail stabbing. This is from August 27th, going back to August 27th. Lyles did not mention the victim by name or discuss any specific measures the Charlotte area transit system or police are taking to address safety on public transit. I guess there's just no way to prevent this stuff. It's just going to happen, right? And I mean, of course, things slip through the cracks, but these are some pretty big cracks to have a rap sheet as long as this guy did, and he's still out there. So that is what was happening in social media discussion over the weekend. How do we stop this? What's going on? And of course, there were a lot of takes that were very racially focused, that either this is what this particular demographic, people who are Black, people who look like Mr. Brown, this is what they end up doing in higher numbers, or this is something that's particular to certain regions. This is an inner city problem. Or like I said, there's some people who just think, oh, it's mental health, I guess. And I wanted to open this discussion up a little broader and read for you. This is something I wrote. I probably wrote it in 2020 or 2021, but it was published in my book, Christianity and Social Justice, in 2021. I've been talking about these issues for a while, and it's in a response I made to Jemar Tisby. When Jemar Tisby is blaming all of the violence that takes place because minority groups are committing more of it. And he says that it's essentially because of white people too. You can trace that back to the way white people have treated Black people, right? That's the whole issue. Did I say Jemar Tisby? We're going to get to Jemar Tisby. Phil Vischer, but they're basically the same narrative. So it was a Phil Vischer thing I was responding to. And let's see, where do I want to start? So Jemar Tisby's part of this too. I guess I talk about both of them. So he talks about this in The Color of Compromise. You know, racism just adapts. Racism never goes away. It's all racism. Did I get rid of it? I thought I had it queued up, but maybe I have the wrong page number here in the book. Okay, so let's go to Vischer. So Vischer takes this same narrative and promotes it in a very viral video that went viral in 2020 about racism in America. I say this: Vischer incorrectly states that vagrancy laws were only applied to Black men and ignores the desperate economic circumstances in which they arose. He neglects to discuss the ways in which some white people promoted integration gradually and the constitutional concerns associated with forced integration. When it comes to disparities in home ownership, Vischer, so I talk about all these economic things. Vischer's wrong about all of it, basically. He leaves out things that are inconvenient to his narrative. Fast forward, he insinuates that white people's fear of Black people created disparities in policing and cites a poll known to be compromised, which falsely alleges that the majority of Americans blame Black people for crime in 1968. However, he overlooks the fact that many urban Black people requested additional law enforcement themselves. I thought that was an interesting thing, that the communities which experience high crime, if you actually poll those communities, generally, they'll say they want more law enforcement, but then they end up voting for people who do the exact opposite, right? And rage bait against the police and so forth. Interesting dynamic. Vischer also points to higher incarceration rates as evidence that harsher penalties for drug-related crimes, especially for crack cocaine violations, single out Black people. Yet again, he fails to mention that most of the Congressional Black Caucus supported these harsher measures. So I go through all that, drug crimes and all that. Vischer insists that there is no visible connection between higher incarceration rates and higher violent crime rates, yet only about 17% of Black people in prison are there on drug charges. Violent crime is currently the most proportionally significant category in which more Black people are incarcerated than white people. The FBI reports that Black people account for over 37% of violent crime arrests, even though they make up a little over 13% of the population, according to the Census Bureau. The Department of Justice found that over 70% of violent crimes against Black people are committed by other Black people. Black criminals also commit violent crimes against white victims 9 times as often as white criminals do against Black victims. It is likely that this data could make more sense of the current 33% incarceration rates among Blacks than Vischer's charge of white racism. Vischer also alleges that a study of drivers in New Jersey showed discrimination. You're going to skip past that one because you got that one wrong too. At one point, Vischer falsely attributes the findings in a survey specifically focused on economic conditions experienced by Black people who lived in urban areas to Black people in general. At another point, he cites a study that suggests white teachers are half as likely to recommend a Black student for a gifted trek. So in every category, Vischer is saying law enforcement, every category, it's just against Black people. The whole system is just rigged, and that's why you see these crimes. I go through the Planned Parenthood stuff. Let's see, was there anything else I wanted to mention here? Okay, I think that was pretty much it. I think there's some more things I say about this, but the long story short, you have a higher rate, and I do go through later on some stats. It wasn't always this way, basically, and I don't know where I went over that, but I'll just from memory. During the 1920s and through, I don't know, right before the Great Society, you had much higher, as long as we've been tracking these kinds of stats, at least, you have much higher marriage rates. You have also lower crime rates. Now, as long as we've been tracking it, Black people have always contributed more to the crime rate as opposed to quote unquote white people. And that's how the crime statistics are done. So I'm just using their categories, but much lower than today. So today is, I think the out of wedlock birth rate is something, it's like close to 70%, maybe a little over that. If you're born into a situation, you're a Black person being born, it's more than likely you're going to be born to a single mother. It was the reverse before the Great Society stuff. Now, I don't think the Great Society makes sense of all of this. I think it exacerbated a problem that was already present. But we've, through policies, and this is a good situation to talk about this, through our own policies, we have made this problem much, much worse. So when you got a guy with a rap sheet, he's got 13 arrests, he's been stealing, he's been assaulting, and he's still just on the street. He keeps getting acquitted somehow. He keeps getting slaps on the wrist. Then what do you have to blame? You have policies to blame at that point. There were so many times that this could have been prevented, and yet it wasn't. And that's been our problem for quite some time, especially since the late 1960s, 70s. We've had an aversion to, and I say we, I'm meaning politicians have had an extreme aversion to doing things that would have disparate impact, enforcing policies, some of them already on the books, that could be accused of racism because there's some kind of a disproportionate impact it has on people who are Black or people who are fill in the blank, Hispanic in certain areas. That's, coming from Los Angeles, that's the thing you hear the most about. It's going to have a disparate impact on this population. Therefore, it must be racist. You can't do it. Well, that's just killing us. That's just making the cities inhospitable places, making the cities, because they're controlled by mostly Democrats who are living with these high numbers of these populations, and they are not enforcing basic laws about crime. They are creating inhospitable environments, and people don't want to live there anymore, and for good reason. They don't want to take public transportation. Right now, I live about 2 hours outside of New York City. It is very well known in my area, if you go down to New York City, don't take the subway. That's just kind of a common sense thing, and it's been that way since the Daniel Penny thing. There's way too many things that have happened on the subway. I mean, there's crazy people that ride the subway. There's murders that happen on the subway. The subways are dirty. Don't ride the subway. If you go down to New York City, take a cab, drive yourself, find other accommodations and public transportation. Subway is just not something that you're supposed to do, and everyone here knows it, so they don't take it. And so who takes the subway then, right? It's people primarily who are caught, people who can't afford other means of transportation, and so they're forced to take transportation that carries more risks with it. It's a big problem. And now you have someone who's running for New York City mayor who will likely win, who's a communist, who will make the situation likely more worse than it even is now. There's no solution. There's no political solution, right? And this plays into why Donald Trump is going into Chicago. I don't like that, by the way. I like federalism. I like localism. I don't like the central government playing an outsized role in what should be local law enforcement. But I can understand also why Donald Trump feels the way he does about this. He's a nationalist. He looks at the whole country. He thinks it's an embarrassment what's happening in Chicago. It's an embarrassment what's happening in Los Angeles. I'm sending in the National Guard. It's an embarrassment what happens in D.C. I'm going to clean these places up. If they won't do it, I'll do it. And he will do it. That's the thing. He actually will get results that the local populations, for some reason, they're not voting for people who will give them those results. These places are basically places that you can't live. They're inhospitable. And so what options do you even have? Well, your options are you get out of the city, which a lot of people do, including Black people, including people who have been there for a long time, whose families go back generations. They just get out. As soon as they have the economic means to do it, they leave and they never look back. That's one solution, right? And that just makes the situation worse because your intelligent population, the people who actually have maybe some virtue and should be the leaders of society, they're gone. You have a brain drain happening. So now you're just leaving the criminal elements to control things even more. The people who are there end up voting for governments who do not enforce the laws, or they change the laws so that they're even less hard on crime. So you end up just having a war zone. And you either have to tolerate living in a war zone or you get out as soon as you can. And most people who have some common sense try to get out. If they have to work in the city, they work in the city, but their families are protected in the suburbs, right? We've been going through this for years and years and years, and it doesn't seem like in many places there is a local remedy for it. You don't have people winning who are going to carry out the policies necessary. Now, what policies would those be? It's fairly simple to me. What you would need to have, you would, what did I call it on X the other day? I called it a type of paternalism, which I'm going to read you an article from Jemar Tisby in a moment. Paternalism, apparently very, very bad, but I don't think I said genteel. What did I say? Kind of a benevolent. I think I said benevolent paternalism. That's what you would need, a benevolent paternalism. What does that mean? That means you're going to have to be very hard on crime. And there's going to have to be a strong police presence. If people can't protect themselves, they're going to need to be protected. If people won't limit their choices to destroy society, those choices are going to have to be limited. You would also need to have available low to medium skilled jobs that the people there could do and make an honest wage and take care of themselves and hopefully families that they would form. And you'd have to cut off the welfare. You would need welfare reform so that they're not incentivized to just spend their time thinking about what crimes they can do and what trouble they can get into. And children being created into an environment where they're not going to be protected and so forth. And so that's the other thing. You would need those kind of but those factories and those jobs are never going to go to those places, obviously, if there's not first a heavy police presence and crime isn't curtailed. That's the first step you would need to do. And then the third thing, it would be you would need a heavy moral presence. There would have to be a very strong disincentives, public shame, if you will, to participate in evil things. And so there would need to be a cooperative effort among Christians to evangelize those regions and make sure that there's a hope. And with all the mess that there is, there's a mechanism for counseling people out of those things should they want to leave their dysfunctional lifestyles. That's it. I mean, what other options are there, right? I mean, for a plan, right? That would be the plan. That would be what you would have to do. Otherwise, they're just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. And there's no solution in sight. So when you have major cities going down this road, they're a threat, and you're going to get heavy-handed people in the state or national governments who want to correct that mess because they're tired of hearing about it. And it does affect the economy. It affects investment. It affects all kinds of other things. So I think that's always been the solution. But Jemar Tisby says, no, that's not a solution for these kinds of things. In fact, he just wrote this today. So I'll just show you. Jemar Tisby, for those who don't know, and I don't have a problem saying this, very much promoted by guys like Lyndon Duncan and even Al Mohler and your bigwig evangelicals years ago as kind of an up-and-coming historian of the new intelligentsia that the evangelicals are producing. Now they don't talk about it because he started working with Kendi. He got on the CRT train really hard. He started saying very heretical things. And now he's not, I don't think he's even on X anymore. He writes from his Substack and posts on Blue Sky. But he wrote something on his Substack today. Because I went to his Substack. I just wanted to find out. I was like, is he talking about this situation down in Charlotte? And it doesn't appear that that's this. If he is, it's related to this. And it's more along the lines of the National Guard coming in and cleaning these places up. That's the thing that's a problem. So here's Jemar Tisby. Why Trump's plan to send troops into cities is about race and not crime. Okay. All right. It's about race, not about crime. This article blend. All right. So this is what he says. At first, Trump's talk of sending troops into major U.S. cities sounds like partisan warfare, red versus blue. But look more closely and you'll see another dynamic. Trump isn't just targeting Democrat strongholds. He's targeting black leadership. Chicago, L.A., Baltimore, Oakland, all run by black mayors, often black women. Just think about that for a moment. I mean, I don't know if that's the point he wanted to make, if you just stop the article there. I mean, all these places, high crime areas that Trump saw, it's just weird, right? They're all run by black women. What could be? I mean, it's if Democrats is not the, I don't know why he's making this point. He said this is Jemar Tisby's point, but he's saying it's not Democrats, they're black women. That's the thing these cities have in common. And then he says, when Trump points to Chicago and these other cities as so far gone, notice who leads them. They're all black mayors. And then there's a picture of Jefferson Davis, right? It just that's a line. That's a connection right there. Jefferson Davis right there with his adopted son, Jim Limber, a biracial black child. So Jefferson Davis, he's just like Donald Trump. Look at him with his paternalism. Look at him trying to help this black son that he adopted. I mean, I don't know if this makes the point Jemar Tisby wants to make either. The president of the Confederacy adopting a black child. I mean, I thought they all hated black people, right? But here he is adopting a black child. And so instead of drawing the obvious conclusion from this, maybe they didn't actually hate, maybe not all of them hated black people. The conclusion that he draws is there must have been hatred behind the adoption. There must be hatred behind trying to stop crime in these places where high populations of black people and Latinos live. Because we know already, we just assume that all these people are haters. So everything they do is motivated by that, whether it's Jefferson Davis or Donald Trump. So he talks about white racial paternalism. He says it's not enough to call these attacks racist. They're also paternalistic. He's not talking about the attack in Charlotte. He's talking about the attack of Donald Trump and wanting to have law and order in these places. At the core of white supremacy is the belief that black people cannot care for themselves. White racial paternalism casts black communities as intellectually, morally, politically, and economically deficient, whether because of skin color or more often today because of supposed flaws in black culture. So this is the funny thing. Like you can't escape the charge, because even if you want to say it's a culture thing, look at the rap music, look at what they're singing about. That too is racist. You can't talk about that either. That's just like going after them for their skin color, right? You're just, to the social justice mind, it's the same thing. This deficiency is imagined and permanent. The so-called remedy is white control. Paternalism insists that black people need guardians, caretakers, or overseers, that white leadership is both necessary and beneficial. That's why black political power is treated as a crisis. A black mayor, black voters, or black demands for equal rights appear not as democratic progress, but as breakdown of the social order. In this paternalistic imagination, black people must be protected from themselves, like a child who has to be put on a leash to keep them from running into traffic. Now, I don't know who's leading the efforts that Trump has to go into these places, but I'll just tell you this, with the ICE videos that I've seen out there from Los Angeles, there's an awful lot of people who are not white in ICE gear going into these regions. I'm positive Trump doesn't think about it this way. I think he looks at it as there's crime over there. There's a population that doesn't seem to be limiting itself, and you have leaders who aren't enforcing the law. So therefore, I'm going to go do it. That's the simple explanation and the one that makes the most sense. But Jemar Tisby wants to make this it's a civil war thing. All right. So he goes, the lost cause, right? The lost cause was a myth that recast the Confederacy as a noble, slavery as benevolent, and defeat as honorable. The myth of the lost cause arose like the smoke still clouding the air in the aftermath of the Civil War. All right. So, Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, they're just seen as heroes when they shouldn't be. And he takes this quote here. Let me give you a quote. This is from Jefferson Davis. In moral and social condition, African slaves have been elevated from brutal savages into docile, intelligent, and civilized agricultural laborers, and supplied not only with bodily comforts, but with careful religious instructions. Oh, no. To make an observation like that, to say that they're better off under a system that limits choices and teaches them Christianity, by and large, now, obviously, there's exceptions to this, but if you go through all the stats on slave conditions, if you read the slave narratives, If you look at what foreign observers were saying, yes, during the time of the 1840s, when this is an 1861 speech. So the 1860s, when this was happening, there was a great interest in evangelizing the slaves who lived in mostly the American South at that time. And Jefferson Davis talking about how their condition is better as a result of that. I mean, this is something a lot of people said this at the time. He goes into Fitzhugh and what George Fitzhugh had to say. George Fitzhugh, very much a hierarchist who he basically even lectured in Ivy League schools talking about how hierarchy is inevitable, and basically, well, I'll just read this quote. The slaves of the South are the happiest, in some sense, the freest people in the world. The children of the family, black and white, are well fed, well clad, and well taken care of. The master labors for the slave, and the slave labors for the master. Fitzhugh's words drip with paternalism. So he's saying, look, they just do better when they're in this circumstance. When they're not making all the leadership decisions, they just tend to be happier. They tend to do better. And this is, of course, the same thing Donald Trump's doing. So he goes on and puts more quotes in there. And it's just typical Jemar Tisby stuff. Everything in Jemar Tisby's mind, it seems like, goes back to it's civil rights or it's slavery. That's the cause of all things. Now, I wanted to, just for fun, I wanted to read you. This is an article at the Abbeville Institute from 2015. It's called Apostles of Racism. Anyway, I've referenced this article many times before because all it is quotes. It's not even an article. As a class, the blacks are indolent, improvident, servile, and licentious. And that's the first quote, okay? And the question is, who said this in American history, right? And it's quote after quote after quote after quote that are basically just like this. Missouri for white men and white men for Missouri, right? Colonization would keep our Anglo-Saxon institutions as well as our Anglo-Saxon blood pure and uncontaminated. On and on and on. And you think, well, this has to be the Klansman. That's what's going on here. And then you find out every single one of these quotes was a very prominent Republican, right? I thought Dinesh D'Souza said it's all the Democrats, right? Every single one of the quotes is from a Republican. Maybe more than a third of them are Abraham Lincoln quotes. Horace Greeley, Frederick Law Olmsted. It's a who's who, Lyman Trumbull of the Republican Party. And that's basically why the Republican Party formed, was for free. They wanted to keep black people out of the Western territories, wanted to keep it for free black. So why isn't it, this is just my question, historically speaking, why isn't it that Jemar Tisby, why doesn't he ever pick on them? It seems like, I mean, maybe he does at times. I just haven't seen it, but it's like he always goes to, it's this paternalistic thing. It's the Southern mindset here. It's the Southern elites, and it's coming out in Donald Trump, who's from New York. He's got that mindset, but it's never Northern Republicans. It's never the way they viewed the differences between peoples. And, Northern Republicans did not have the paternalistic mindset perhaps as much. They didn't live around black people in high numbers. They didn't have slave populations in high numbers anymore. The first Jim Crow laws had already been in effect by the time the Civil War came around in the North. And they just didn't want them around in their society. That was pretty much it. One time Abraham Lincoln even was looking into the feasibility of how do we ship all these people back to Africa. But Jemar Tisby doesn't really talk about that, right? The line, the politically correct line goes from the founding fathers, mostly the Southern ones, like Thomas Jefferson, right? It usually starts with Thomas Jefferson. And then there's a direct line to the Confederacy. And then there's a direct line to segregation. And then there's a line to Donald Trump. And that's the only history you need to know about. And that's the reason that you still have crime, high levels of crime in these areas. And it's anyone who wants to solve it is accused of being a racist. So I just pitch it to you this way. What's the solution? What is the solution? I mean, really, I don't have any evidence that this crime that happened in Charlotte, North Carolina was racially motivated. By the way, a lot of people are saying that online, and so there's no evidence for it, right? The same thing with the Derek Chauvin thing. There was no evidence saying this was racially motivated. So don't say that. We don't know. I don't know. But this guy had a long rap sheet. Why? I mean, there's situation after situation comes up like this, and you start asking yourself, why is it that people in only certain regions in this country, and it tends to be an outsized group, tend to be minority populations, members of minority populations. Why is it that they get slaps on the wrist if they live in these regions? What's up with that? Why? What do you do about it? What's the solution to what happened in Charlotte? I mean, the mayor has no solution. Just a mental health issue, I guess. Things happen. Isn't there a policy prescription? Isn't there something that can be done? Aren't there harsher things that can be done? Can't someone be kept behind bars when they assault someone and keep breaking and entering and robbing people? I mean, at what point do you say this person can't be on the street? I think the last capital crime that was punished in North Carolina was something like early 2000s. New York has basically outlawed it. It doesn't happen. Most states don't do it anymore. I don't even know when the last one happened. But this is a situation where it should happen. If you had actual punishments for these things, there would be deterrence. But if you're not going to punish them, you're going to get more of this. Law and order is the only way forward. And anyone who tells you that that's racist or paternalism in and of itself is just racist and that therefore it must be wrong, I think they're the ones that don't want to solve the problem. They're the ones that must hate so badly the people that live under these conditions. They must want more murders. They must want more crime because they don't have any constructive solution for it. Jemar Tisby has no solution. All he does is rail against Donald Trump for having a solution. And admittedly, I don't like Trump's solution. I already said that. I would rather this handled on the state level. But is Illinois going to do anything about Chicago? I mean, at least in North Carolina, you would think they're kind of a swing state, but you'd think there's maybe some more Republican influence. But maybe that doesn't even make a difference anymore. Who was it? I wasn't going to talk about it, but who was it last week in what state? Indiana, of all places. This state, I think it was a member of Congress, I believe, who was saying we're going to import 20,000 Haitians, like really into the interior. I mean, we have Puerto Rico, we even have Florida, which is closer. I mean, we could use people in Alaska, right? Why do we put them in Alaska? They really want to come to America, or why do we even need to take them in at all? But we're going to import these very different people in a population that has a much higher crime rate, different language barrier, different religious. They're different in every way. We're just going to put them in the heartland. We're going to put them in Indiana of all places, right? But, Republicans are contributing to this problem as well, even during Trump's presidency. But if no one's going to solve the problem, which I would love to see it solved on a local level, then what do you expect to happen? Someone's going to eventually demand it's solved. Or you just barricade the cities and say no one go in there. And I guess it's going to be a war zone and let them fight it out. It'll be like Escape from New York. Those old movies, Escape from New York, Escape from LA. It'll be like that, those kinds of conditions. We'll just block it off and everyone there will have a shooting war. And when it's over, then let us know and we'll come in and repopulate it, take it back. I mean, you tell me, right? You tell me what the solutions are. Because, I mean, some people want to say like, bring back segregation or bring back some kind of like a very intentional type of, I'm not saying many people are saying this, but a slave type system again or something. I mean, there's various reasons I think those things are impractical and on some level not right. At least I think in our current population with the lack of virtue and everything, you really want to do that. You really want to bring in a slave-based system when we already have slave systems. We have the prison system. We already have sex slavery. We already have, I would say that a lot of the benefit of the labor that's overseas that we benefit from is, basically slave labor. The illegal migrant situation is basically slave labor. None of that is good. None of it all produces more crime, and we don't have virtue anymore. So like that, that's not really a solution at all to any of this. We're so downstream from that. What I think said at the beginning is the only solution to this. And it's the only morally right solution to this. Strong on crime, low to medium skilled jobs, and an intentional missions effort from Christians. That's it. Thought about this for a while, for years, and I don't see any other way. So I wanted to just weigh in on that, semi quickly. I mean, we've been going for 45 minutes, but it sort of sticks in my craw to see all this wound reopened every time a situation like this happens, and it's not going away. And so I think it's good to just put it out there. Here's a solution. We have to craft this into a policy, and then it has to be enacted. And you can't just shoot at the guy who wants to do something to enact something similar to that, because they're the only ones that want to actually solve the problem. I don't think Jemar Tisby is interested in solving the problem. So I'll take some comments and then we'll go to all the various other news stories we have. Cosmic Treason, do they vote for those who do the opposite, though, John? Maybe the Democrats are stealing all the local elections. I've thought about this concerning LA just because I have a connection to LA and California in general. Things don't seem to add up or make sense. And I have many stories along the lines of that my relatives have told me. But as far as statistics and study, I mean, the Democrats have kept this pretty untraceable. So I don't know. I was looking recently, actually, I was trying to find evidence of stolen elections in California, and it's all circumstantial stuff. It's very hard to prove those things. But I think you are onto something that could very well be the case. There's guys who, a few years ago, there was a guy in California, in Los Angeles, who was a Democrat, but he was a MAGA Democrat, and he was a businessman, and he did not have a back. He wasn't caught on camera saying racy things that would cost him an election. And he ran, and they still mowed him over, right? But that's in Los Angeles. That's where you have to run. You have to run in the Democrat primary. And it's possible the conditions just have to get so bad, and they've gotten very bad, where, it's just a landslide in favor of someone who wants to do something about it. But it takes a long time to get there. It just... people, this is the thing too with the accelerationists who think, oh, like right now, Nick Fuentes is on this whole, let's vote for Gavin Newsom over JD Vance. And people are debating, is he serious? Is he not? Blah, blah, blah. But I heard him give the pitch on his show. I don't listen to his show. I think it's ridiculous, to be quite honest. But I heard him give the pitch, what was it, 2 weeks ago, saying, look, I thought millions, the BAP guys, the Bronze Age pervert guys, these are the pagan right people. I thought they said billions must die. And we basically making the argument that things have to get so bad. We have to basically suicide ourselves. We have to get the Democrats in there. We have to get the communists in there and just train wreck America before people will really wake up. And then we can rebuild from the ruins. How come it never happens that way? Right? It just doesn't. Look at the country. Look at South Africa. The conditions are so bad and they just keep getting worse and people just become accustomed to it. That's all that happens. People just adjust to it, and the rich are able to shield themselves, and everyone else has to survive under these horrible, dismal conditions. Same thing in the United States. People just adjust to these terrible conditions. They think it's normal. I was in Chicago a few years ago. I remember talking to some folks there, and I was like, Chicago's got such high levels of crime. Aren't you afraid living here? Haven't there been, murders? And they're like, oh, it's not a big deal. Yeah, there was one a few weeks ago, like 1 block, 2 blocks over. And I'm thinking, well, goodness, I wouldn't want to live near that, but you just get used to it. That's what happens. You adjust yourself like the frog boiling. You just adjust yourself to the new set of conditions. John Carter says no majority of blacks anywhere vote for people who are going to give them less free stuff and hold them accountable for their behavior. I heard that claim a lot. I don't know if that's true or not. I have to look into this a little more just because I know that there are some places, especially in the Caribbean, where you have very high populations of African immigrants or slave descendants, and they still have decent incomes, largely it might be tourism related. They still, obviously Haiti's not that, but I'm trying to think, was it Tobago I was looking up recently that had that? Maybe AI can tell me right now. I'm gonna just type in a Q here and see. Okay, let me see. Because I remember being skeptical. I'm like, I don't know if this is as universal as some people are saying. Okay, well, it's giving me rich areas too. There are that in our country. It's not what I was expecting, but it's giving me specific locales in the United States. So you have Ladera Heights, Baldwin Hills, Los Angeles, California. There's View Park, Windsor Hills, Los Angeles, Mitchellville, Maryland, Charles County suburbs, Olympia Fields, Illinois. So places where people that make more money are able to escape, and they've formed communities that do have lower crime. Barbados. I think that was the one I was looking at. Barbados was kind of oddly, it has a high population of black people, but it has a low crime rate. So there are some places like that. I think this is the thing. It's very complicated. And there's so many converging elements that cause these situations. And I've been a guy for years. And of course, I've read a lot of these, racial determinist guys, biodeterminists, I tend to call them. And I'm not against reading every analysis of why there's high crime among certain populations in certain places at all. I've listened to Jared Taylor's stuff going back years. I don't even know if he would qualify as that, to be honest, but he's made arguments that sound similar to that. He's one of the smarter ones in that, I guess, race realist type of direction. But the thing is, I think at the end of the day, I don't know that it matters, to be quite honest with you. I'm a shared experience guy. I think the experience you have with populations is what you base your policies on. If you've tried everything, or if you've tried solutions that don't seem to work, don't try those solutions, try other solutions. Human nature is also the same across populations, right? Sin is sin. So a place like, where did I just say? Barbados, you don't need those same policies, obviously. Or maybe those policies are already there and they're being enforced. Place like Haiti, like if you were going to make order out of Haiti, it would have to be so much more drastic than anything you would even do in an American city. Like it would be dictatorship day one, no tolerance, a militarized zone. I mean, that's kind of where Haiti's at. And what made it Haiti the way it is, right? I mean, you have demon worship. I mean, that could be part of it. There's a heavy satanic and voodoo presence in Haiti. I mean, that doesn't help, right? I don't think this stuff boils down to one thing. I think there's a lot of things that converge to create conditions on the ground, but it's the conditions over time that are the important thing. What do you do in the face of those conditions? What's the solution? And I think there's some universal things for any population that are solutions. You got to punish crime. There's got to be opportunities for people to fulfill their responsibilities before God. If you don't have those, then people are going to go towards crime. There has to be a public shame restored somehow. And that goes for any population. But if Republicans would actually vote, the mayor would be different. But according to my 30-year-old, his peers think it's not worth it and don't even pay attention. That's a big problem among younger people. I've noticed that too. They don't think that voting is a solution anymore. All right, I can only take a few more before we get to the next thing. Federalism doesn't work with a universal franchise. I think what he means by that is if everyone's voting for policies that emanate from the center, federalism doesn't work. Yeah, I mean, this has been many gradual steps we've taken to get to the point we're at now. The thing is, people are generally better governed by those close to them than those distant from them. So people who have to live under the conditions they set for themselves tend to set good policies because they don't want to live under bad conditions. But when you're governed by a distant elite bureaucracy, they don't have the same incentive. And as we've become more nationalized, there has been more and more of a disconnect between those in Washington, D.C., who now are setting more and more of the policies for this country, and those in outlying areas. And different sets of policies have to be applied differently in different areas. You can't have one size fits all because does a rural population out in the middle of Missouri, let's say, need the same kinds of laws that are on the books, that should be on the books at least, and enforced in a place like Chicago? Absolutely not. They don't have the same problems. So why would they need the same police presence? They should have Andy Griffith, and Barney Fife. They don't need people that are going to, an army to stop basically what amounts to gang warfare that are their own militias. So you do need uniquely tailored policies. And federalism takes that into account. The government we have now, though, where things become more and more and more about what emanates from the center, is not capable of forming unless they become a totalitarian regime, they just can't even manage everything that happens in this vast country. Let's see. I see the cursive ham stuff is in the chat. I'm not going to get into that now. I do plan on getting into that, by the way, at some point. So I've asked someone actually to write about that for TruthScript for some months, and I haven't gotten a manuscript yet, so I might have to write on it. But I do not believe a lot of the Oh man, I'm going to get into it if I start talking about it. I'm just going to stay away from it right now. Sorry, we already got to. No offense, cosmic treason. I'm going to try to find someone else. John Carter wants to know what my argument is against segregation. We clearly can't live peaceably together. I think for me, so I haven't seen actually a very informed policy prescription to bring back segregation. It's just people ranting online saying it used to be better when there was segregation. That's all I've really seen. We should go back to that. I don't think you can completely, and I think you already are in some sense. Let me explain what I mean by that. When there was forced integration, there was a de facto segregation that was produced as a result of that. Even where I live, in the neck of the woods, in the suburbs where I live, there was a de facto segregation that just took place. So people moved out of regions that were high crime if they were able to do it, and they made a life for themselves in the suburbs. And yes, mostly different kinds of white people, different kinds of descendants of Europeans, but there were also people who had a higher income, who were minority populations, who tended to be better adjusted to that environment, and they were able to come out of the cities as well, because the schools went to pot and the society went to pot, the businesses moved out, and it created the conditions that you have now. So we actually are downstream from the kind of society people talk about when they talk about, well, what about the days of segregation? What about when you used to have separations between peoples in these urban environments? Didn't that kind of keep people separate and keep people from doing crimes to one another because they didn't have the opportunity for it? Well, I mean, you could try to enact a policy like that, I suppose, in an urban environment, but the cat's kind of out of the bag at this point. Most of these environments are so, because the population that's left is so oriented towards crime and so forth. I don't see, like I said before, a political solution. They might poll sometimes and say they want relief, but then they're always voting for not having relief. And I don't even think you would need, I mean, look at this situation here. Would you even need a segregation policy? Number one, you're never going to get it. Number two, I think it's impractical. Number two, it's not the same conditions that you had in the 1940s or 50s. But number three, what about just a basic punishing this guy for the crimes he's already done? Wouldn't that have prevented this? That seems to be the main thing that's not happening. If you just don't punish crime, you're going to get these kinds of things. So the next step would be, how do you bring in a mechanism that actually punishes crime? The circumstances under which segregation happened, if you read things like, read the Southern Manifesto. I don't know how many people actually have read that, but if you go read it, read what they're saying, and they don't want forced integration. And the reason they don't want forced integration is because they say in there, and this is not quite a direct quote, but it's close. They say for many years, I don't know if it's decades, but for a long time, Black populations, where there's a high Black populations in regions in the South, and white populations have been essentially learning to build trust with one another. In other words, conditions have been improving, and these things take time. It takes a gradual time. And if you forcibly integrate, what you are going to do is you're going to create a new level of mistrust, and there's going to be more crime. And it's not even an argument for universally segregation is good. At least I don't see that. It's more of, there are people who thought that, by the way, but in that particular document, it's more of a circumstantial thing. If you do this policy right now, it's premature and you're going to cause problems. What happened? It caused problems. And people who were able to pull their kids out of schools right away because standards went down and discipline went down and all the other things. And I mean, read even what happened in the North in places like, I believe it was Long Island, race war in high school. There's so many accounts of what happened after that and how these neighborhoods just went downhill. But you can't put the genie back in the bottle. So I think your only way, I mean, it'd be nice to have a low police presence. You don't have, and if you had a situation where people are managing themselves, then you could do that, but you don't have that situation and you don't have that option anymore. It's too many incentives to move out of these areas if you're a high achiever. So the only way is to, and I hate to say militarized zone, but you have to come in with a very strong police presence. I don't see any way around it. It's just a different situation now. And the public virtue is so much worse now than it was back in the early part of the 20th century. Question, says Jen, what are your detailed thoughts on Candace Owens' reconstruction on history and Christianity? We're going to talk about that as the program unfolds. I can't get into more on this issue. I'm more starting a discussion than ending one, but I hope that this at least gets the ball rolling. Okay, let's talk about what is next on the agenda. Which do I want to do PCA or do I want to do? Let's do Trump. Can we do Trump? I'm going to play for you some clips from a Trump speech that apparently happened just recently. Here's the first one for you.
Created the first ever Department of Justice task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias. And for those people that are a little bit naive or not well-read, there is a tremendous anti-Christian bias. We don't hear about it. We don't think about it. You hear about anti-Semitic, but you don't hear about anti-Christian. Now, you have a strong anti-Christian bias, but we're ending that rapidly, I will tell you. It's a whole... We're in a much different world today than we were 1 year ago. This is like a different world.
Good for President Trump. He talks about the fact that anti-Semitic hate speech, quote unquote, gets so much play in the media, but you don't hear about anti-Christian bias. And that's absolutely true. If you think for 1 second, it would have been better to have Kamala Harris. There's a bridge I can sell you. I don't know what to say. I mean, we are, despite not getting every single thing, we are getting so many things I just didn't think I would hear come out of the mouth of the president of the United States. And that's one of them that I really appreciate, centering things on Christians again. Do you know that there's Christians in Nigeria getting mowed down left and right? It's a war zone over there. And you don't ever hear about it. You hear about what happens in Palestine, but you don't hear about the record numbers of Christians dying at much higher levels in places like Nigeria and other places too around the world, like Pakistan and India. So I'm really grateful President Trump talked about that and wants to do something about it. Here's another clip.
Truly, there are evil people. We're all people of religion, but there are evil people, and we have to confront that. I just give my love and hope to the family of the young woman who was stabbed this morning or last night in Charlotte by a madman, a lunatic. Just got up and started. It's right on the tape. Not really watchable because it's so horrible, but just viciously stabbed. She's just sitting there. So they're evil people. We have to be able to handle that. If we don't handle that, we don't have a country. And
people went after Trump on the line he doesn't even mention that situation down in Charlotte. And there he is. I mean, the paint wasn't even dry yet. The ink wasn't even dry and people were already going after him. But no, he did talk about it. He did talk about Iryna Zarutska, and I'm grateful that he did. Okay. I just wanted to highlight those from President Trump. Let's talk about the disappearance of American masculinity, shall we? This is another reason, by the way, that in some of these regions, in urban areas especially, you need a higher police presence, because who else is going to do it? American men have been so disincentivized. They've been stripped of their backbone from doing anything that would showcase force or authority. They just, it's sad. It's sad to see what's happened. It's been gradual steps over a long period of time. But that's another thing that historically has changed. I mean, you can try to pine for the days, right, of yore and say we had a better circumstance back when we had lower police presence. Men were men. We were able to solve our own problems. Different communities, even in New York City, you had different communities would police themselves. Now, for the Italians, that looked like the mob. Not saying I like the mob necessarily, but hey, look, those guys, I don't think anyone would argue they weren't men, right? I mean, for all the problems and the faults and the issues that needed to be solved there, because they were also in an enterprise of crime, they kept petty crime down. You would actually pay a fee, because I know people who, growing up in New York, they saw this kind of thing. They knew shopkeepers and so forth when they were kids, and you would pay a fee to make sure that you were left alone. And the mob would do the police work, right? And different communities police themselves, essentially. But that those situations, those conditions don't exist anymore. That's one reason you can't go back, because you don't have the self-government. You don't have the capacity for it. And why is that? Well, because men primarily have been stripped of their masculinity. They're not supposed to ever show something that might have been motivated by testosterone. And and by the way, I should just make as a little addendum here, posting obnoxious things online, that's not a display of testosterone. That's not necessarily. I mean, I guess it could if you're making a major risk to your livelihood and you're about to lose your job because you did it, and it was to say the truth that was going to save someone or something. But in most cases, that's not, that can be very much a fake kind of bravery. It's not even real. It's just bluster. It's not a true test of whether someone actually is brave necessarily. So I see a lot of that. I see a lot of edginess when edginess is now somewhat rewarded, to be quite honest with you, in our current environment. But what about men actually being men? What about, I think Daniel Penny was a man, right? He stopped something. Kyle Rittenhouse was a man, right? Even though he was a boy. Those guys are both young, but they intervened to stop something. And the mainstream media came after them. They stood strong. That's the kind of thing we need more of. We need to hail those people as, put them up on a pedestal. Not that they're greater than humans, but they're examples for the other men. But this is, I think, your typical kind of grill American, right? It's this guy. Okay, then. Well, we have a man who has been stripped of his backbone there, unfortunately. And I feel sorry for him, kind of. Like, I don't feel no compassion for him. Who knows? He probably had a long week at work. He's with his kids. He's at a Phillies game. He's like, I just want to relax, want to see the ball game. I don't want trouble. I have trouble every day at work. I'm tired. And here comes this lady in a really short haircut. And she walks up to him and she demands to have the ball that he caught, that he gave to his son. She demands to have it. And I think this is what makes it so bad. It's not, if it were just him, I would say no big deal. I think if it was just me and I didn't care that much, okay, whatever. The ladies, maybe I would, just out of principle, maybe I would say no to her, but it wouldn't matter that much. But here's the problem. He took it out of his little boy's hand. And he's teaching his boy something in that moment. And he takes it out of his little boy's hand, that gift that he just gave him. And he says, this is the lesson. We caved to bullies. We caved to bullies. This bully came over, wants the ball that I caught that I'm giving to you, this older lady. I'm just going to give it to her. Well, this is what he said later.
I'm very happy that we had to give it to her, but we can't win. She was going to get it anyways.
Sure.
Yeah. He wasn't going to take it, but I decided to give her the ball. I apologize to you, but it was the right thing. We just wanted her to go away.
Yeah.
And it worked out. You got a bat.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Dad, do you have any regrets giving the ball back?
Yeah, like I said, it's, that was what we were there for. We were there to get a home run ball. So I thought I had accomplished this great thing, and putting in his glove meant a lot. And she was just so adamant and loud and yelling and persistent. And I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. There was hundreds of people, just staring. And like I said, she was very, very, very close. And I'm dad of the family, so I didn't want to do something I'd regret. And that was the choice I made, is to just hand the ball back and tell her, go away.
Okay. I'll just say this, if those are the kinds of morally virtuous people that are grilling on the weekends and having kids and trying to raise them right and staying out of trouble, we're toast, right? If every man was like that, we're toast. You can have some men like that in a society and not be toast. But if every man's like that, you're toast, because those are the little compromises that lead to big compromises. I'll just walk away from trouble. You know, there's times to walk away from trouble. There's times when it's not your fight. There's times when it's not a big deal. There's also times to fight. And one of those times, I think, was this. When you have someone who's a bully, you know, it reminds me of the little starling that's chasing the hawk, right? You see that. I mean, I see that all the time, right? It's this big bird and it's being bullied by this little bitty bird. When you let someone like that bully you, and you're letting your son and your daughter see it, and you're saying, this is what we do. We let someone have what they want, even if it doesn't belong to them, because we just don't want trouble. And you start teaching them the chief thing in life is to avoid trouble. You'll just hang your head in shame. There's some things that are worth fighting for. And I think if that's the reason they went there, that they wanted to catch a home run ball, and they did, and he just gives up the main reason they were there. I mean, in his words, that's why they were there. It was a special moment with him and his son. He's willing to give up a special moment with his son to appease an older lady who just wants the ball. You're just teaching that son to continue that kind of pattern the rest of his life. It's very sad to me to see that kind of thing. I know it's a small thing, but those small things end up getting translated into big things. And we need virtuous people in political leadership. There's no solutions. No solutions will ever happen if you don't have those people in political leadership. I've lamented, even recently, I've talked about this a little bit, that with the whole, quote unquote, Christian nationalism debate. And I was just talking to Virgil Walker a little bit about this 2 days ago. He's going to be on the podcast. We recorded a very short video, but it's going to be up on Thursday. We were talking about it, though, that whole kind of G3 Christian nationalist split. For some of you know what I'm talking about, some of you don't, but it was a few years ago. I remember at that moment thinking, if Christians are going to get politically mobilized, it's going to look like people running for office and winning. It's going to look like people producing materials. It's going to look like people getting into organizations and having institutional authority. But mostly it's going to look like people running for office. And you can sit there all day and have theories of what would be good and bad. We need theories. We need plans for what we would do if we had power. But if you don't have power, what's the point, right? What's the point of any of it? How many people have actually run for public office? And I'm not blaming anyone in particular, but I'm just saying of the group that is very adamant that Christians need to be involved, how many of them have actually become state reps, for example, or even just local school, councilmen or on the school board to try to start getting some upward mobility? I can think of hardly any. There's a few. I can't count them on one hand, though, that in that group. And that's one of the things that I suspect is going on broadly in our country. This guy, I don't want to stereotype him too much, but he's probably a Republican. He's probably pretty conservative dad and just wants to be left alone, which we all do. But we're at a point, if we don't stand up, we don't fight for the culture that we have. We don't fight for our kids' future. If we don't have people that fill the ranks of ICE, then what's the point, right? Like, we actually have to go do things. It's true. I mean, Reagan said it, but it is true. Like, freedom is one generation away from extinction. That's always been true. It's always one generation, and it always takes, I think he said the blood of patriots, but this is such a small test. We have to be able to pass these tests. You have to be able to stand up to your local, people are calling her, quote unquote, a Karen, but I don't, it's not fair to Karen. So you have to be able to stand up to an obnoxious woman in order to be able to stand up in greater battles that our society has there in front of us. So my 2 cents on that, it's just sort of a temperature reading of where things are at. And just, I don't know. I don't want to, there's no poll behind this. I don't know how many guys are like this. Just the sense from me is that even guys who talk big tend to be like this. It's just, and you don't need to be obnoxious, right? He could be nice to the lady, But it's just saying, no, ma'am, you know, you can take it up with security guard if you want, but I'm not giving you my son's baseball. I hope you have a good time. I hope you can catch one later. I'm not giving you my son's. And if you keep persisting, I'm going to call security. You know, it's really that simple. And then you show your kids an example of what it looks like to put your foot down, right? Don't be such a pushover. Jennifer Shotwell says, not sure if he was teaching and conflicted how to deal with a woman. He seemed like he thought he might react with aggression. The male-female conflict seemed present too. I mean, yeah, as he did say, he didn't want to do something he'd regret. But what is it? I mean, that's the other thing. Okay, let me just say this. It's not just aggression. Meekness is power under control. That's what we need, right? That's the virtue, right? James Lindsay said earlier last week, power is not a virtue. He's right about that. Power is technically not in the category of virtue, but power will be used by someone either virtuous or not. Meekness is a virtue. Power under control is a virtue. So how about we're the kind of people who don't do something that we would regret? And all you have to do in a situation like that is, ma'am, I'm going to call security. You know, you can call security. Just, you know, go away. I mean, the whole exchange was like 15 seconds. So he didn't even have an opportunity to take the basic first step of showing his son, this is how you deal. You're going to have people like this your whole life, son, who are going to demand things that don't belong to them. And they think they can bully their way into it. We don't give it to them. We don't just cave, right? I think I'm frustrated because I have a life, a former life as a serviceman. And I saw so many people, especially in the state of New York. It wasn't as bad in North Carolina or Virginia, but I definitely saw lots of people who got litigious quick and thought they could. I was working for a furniture company. They could just get however much free furniture they wanted to get if they could just bully themselves into it. And they would typically, it wasn't my call, but they would get it from managers and stuff. And it's drive me nuts. High sense of justice, I guess. Okay. Jennifer also asked if he actually caught the ball. I think the ball, like, it hit a bench or something. I think it rolled and he got it as it rolled or something. So I don't think it was like a direct catch, but he did get it. So, you know, you could say caught, but you could also say he received. I don't know. He got the ball. Okay. Cosmic Treason. One more comment on this. Kid said, you can't win. Bro, as a millennial 2 generations ahead of you, feels badsman. Been there. That's what I was taught to. You just can't win. Well, maybe you can sometimes. And maybe it's not even about you winning. Maybe it's about upholding a righteous standard. You know what I mean? Maybe it's about not giving someone who's a bully what they want. And that's the best thing for them. And that's how you love them. Maybe there's that too. Okay, I'll do one more comment because John Carter has one. John, if you'd caught that ball and given it to your daughter and a black woman came up demanding it from you, would you give it up? And I don't care what ethnicity the person is. No, not if we were there. If it was like not a big deal at all and someone came and asked me nicely, it would be a different scenario. But if someone came demanding, my gut reaction is to say no automatically. That's just kind of who I am. It's like the more belligerent you are, the more I'm not going to give it to you. And sometimes maybe that's not always right, but that's kind of my gut. I think years of, you know, and I had a lot of people who of all kinds of different cultural backgrounds want to bully me or thought they could get something out of me as a serviceman because they probably were able to bully themselves into all kinds of other areas in their life. And they thought, this is one other area. I'm going to get free furniture if I can just get this serviceman. I mean, I remember one time this lady, she tried to like block the door, didn't want me to leave and stuff. I've always, gone through those situations. I've been threatened, it's weird what servicemen go through sometimes. I've had guns pulled on me a few times. I never caved to that stuff. It's just like, if you do that to me, there's more of a chance that I'm going to not give you what you want. So yeah, maybe someday I'll tell you about the stories of having guns pulled, but not for today. Okay. Let's see here. What do we want to talk about next? I don't even know. We have a bunch of stuff here. Let's talk about this poll. So a lot of black pills, I suppose, right? Men aren't men as much. There's no solution for urban crime except almost militarization. I'll give you one more black pill. We'll try to end on some white pills, meaning positive things. But there is a poll that just came out, and it's not the most encouraging thing, right? I keep hearing that there's all this interest in Christianity. I'm paying attention as closely as I can to things that would indicate that, like more Bibles are being sold, and there's, more young men are going to churches at a little bit of higher numbers. But overall, I think we're actually still slipping. I think that things are actually getting darker despite some of the silver linings. And this would back that up. So this is the Cultural Research Center from Arizona Christian University, and in conjunction with George Barna's group, Barna Research. And new research from them explores the beliefs of American adults about sin. The prevailing views are more flattering than logical and more culturally fitting than biblically consistent. One major finding is that just 1 out of every 7, or about 14% of self-described Christians, have a core theology of sin that is biblically accurate. Wow. That's Christians. Okay. The finding regarding sin are part of the annual worldview inventory. More than 4 out of 5 adults agree that there is such a thing as sin. Research revealed the population segments that are substantially less likely than the norm to believe in the existence of sin include Gen Z, Asians, members of the LGBTQ community, and people with no religious affiliation or who doubt the existence of God. Now, for Asians, I'm assuming that probably has something to do with Eastern religions and the idea that sin is an illusion. But it says further, any substantial majority of those who believe in the existence of sin agree on how to define sin. Nearly 3/4 describe it as disobedience to God. However, a majority of those who believe that sin is a reality also contend that there are no absolute sins. Okay, so everything's, I guess, culturally contextual. Only half of all adults believe that everyone on earth has sinned. That's a problem. Although the sinfulness of people is one of the foundations of Christian life, just 2 out of 3 self-professed Christians contend that everyone sins. Adults who attend Protestant churches are far more likely than those who attend in Catholic churches to believe everyone is a sinner, 73% versus 57%. For all you trad cats out there who are trying to say that Catholicism is just more conservative, this and that, I didn't even queue up the videos from last week on the LGBTQ, whatever it was, pilgrimage to Rome. But give me a break, guys. The stats don't bear it out. The Arizona Christian University study revealed that the adult members of Gen Z, who constitute the oldest 1/4 of that generation, currently 18 to 22 years old, are far less likely to believe that everyone sins, 41%, than are members of the 3 older generations, 49% of millennials, 53% of Gen X, and 57% of baby boomers. So every generation, the belief in sin goes down. Blacks, 62%, were notably more likely than whites, 51%, or Hispanics, 50%, to believe all people sin, while a mere 1/4 of all Asians hold that view. Now, this is kind of like a basic American view, by the way, to believe in sin. It's a basic Christian view, but it's also the reason we have checks and balances in our system. It's to bind men's actions with the chains of the Constitution. There's a suspicion about the potential man has to do evil with power. And that's why America is the way it is in some ways. And if we don't believe sin anymore, there's no really reason to have the structure we have. So anyways, let's see. What are there's a lot of stats here. 70% of adults think that while sin may be a reality, people are basically good at heart. So that's a conflicting mindset. The mindset is somewhat more common among self-identified Christians, 72%, than among non-Christians, 65%. Unexpectedly and unbiblically, 7 out of 10 theologically identified born-again adults, 70%, contend that people are basically good at heart. That view is also considerably more prevalent among Catholics and Protestants. Oh my. Okay, well, I think that's all I want to say about this. That's messed up, right? That's, I don't know. What do you do with that, right? If you don't believe in sin, what do you blame crime for? Jesus said that the reason that people do evil things is because it's what comes out of them that corrupts them. It's the heart. If it's the heart that corrupts man, then that's going to, if you believe that, then that's going to also direct how you approach things like sin and crime. The solution of high police presence and more religious presence and the need to work with your hands. I mean, these are all flowing from a Christian mindset of man's design is to work. Women's design is to help, be a helpmate. We have responsibilities before God. Sin, must be suppressed by power, by actual laws. And we're given examples of what a society looks like when those laws are enforced. If we abandon the idea that sin actually comes from an evil heart, then you do get the solutions that are saying, well, we have a mental health issue. And so therefore, the solution is to have more social programs that cost you more tax dollars to help people with mental health. And that's it. And so you don't actually go against crime. You're solving the problem in the wrong place. You're finding it in the wrong place. I think this is one of the problems with even policy prescriptions in inner city areas, because those are the areas where you have the highest liberal mindset. Even if people say they believe in sin, well, what does it even mean? Do they think sin is something that, in many like charismatic Pentecostal traditions, you will find that oftentimes people are sinning because the devil made them do it. Do they believe in actual depravity? Are people actually depraved, and do wicked hearts actually have to be constrained? Or do we live in a utopia waiting to emerge if we just had the right social programs and education? And so we just throw money at problems. Notice I didn't say in my solution earlier, education. I don't see education if it's overtly religious, but no, it's we don't make smarter criminals, and that doesn't solve your issue. So this is part of the problem, right? So this is where, who was it yesterday that said it? I can't remember. Someone said, though, that I think it was Steve Deace. Steve Deace said, we need a national revival. Like, that really is a lot of what we need. That's probably most of it. If you had that, like a real revival that took sin seriously and knew that Christ paid for sins and there was a way of salvation, that would take care of a lot of the underlying issues we have that prevent us from getting to the point of actually solving these problems. So maybe the boomers are right about that. Maybe the religious right is right about that we do need a national revival. It doesn't seem like we're getting one right now. It doesn't seem like we're on, I'm always hopeful of some of these signs of people reading Bibles more, but I don't see, I keep seeing evidence like this that seems to indicate that we're actually becoming more and more post-Christian. So sorry, I apologize in advance for the black pill, but it's better that you know where things are at. So that being said, what else do we want to talk about? We're going to save the Candace Owens things for last. Let's play this clip. This is at a PCA church from about a week and a day ago.
There are many in this room who know the full story, and I want everyone to hear it from me as your pastor, because you're going to hear it either way. We have discerned, Melissa and I, in our journey seeking the Lord's face, is that our calling was to come into full communion and unity with the Catholic Church, a tradition that has shaped and formed me for such a long time. And to be a person of honesty and integrity, I eventually had to ask hard questions that led me to conclusions that were both beautiful for me, but also very disruptive for my life, which involved me leaving this vocational assignment that I have loved very deeply in so many ways.
Yeah. The three. I'm going to ask most particularly GMO's elders, shepherdesses, leaders, come surround them, and anyone else who wants to come on down to the front. Understanding that, as said before the service, this is just see you soon, not full goodbye. Let's go to the Lord here.
Okay, let's talk about what you just saw. I'm going to show you. Michael Foster was the one who posted this. And here's what he had to say about it. He said, all right, here are a few quick clips of a PCA and NAPARC where a teaching elder, Pastor Joel Littlepage, says this: I want everyone to hear it from me as your pastor, because you're going to hear it either way. We had discerned, Melissa and I, in our journey seeking the Lord's face, is that our calling was to come into full communion and unity with the Catholic Church, and then serves communion to the congregation, including teaching elder and the current mission to North America coordinator, Erwin Ince. At the end of the service, T.E. Erwin Ince sends them out with prayers and blessings, saying, I'm going to ask, most particularly GMO's elders, shepherdesses, leaders, come surround them, and anyone else who wants to come on down to the front, put your hands on our dear little pages as we get to go before the Lord on their behalf, and understanding that, as said before the service, this is just see you soon, not full goodbye. So this happened with Erwin Ince. Now, Erwin Ince occupies a position in the PCA. This is not a small figure. Erwin Ince serves as the coordinator of the mission to North America, and he's the adjunct professor of pastoral theology for Reformed Theological Seminary, which means he's sending people out to be pastors. And Erwin Ince was on the hot seat last year. No, it was earlier this year, sorry, for his, speaking of segregation, for his segregated blacks only lunch. I guess, was it a luncheon or something? And this was a big, it came up at the PCA meeting. And I remember Kevin DeYoung was telling someone who brought it up at the microphone that they needed to be orderly because they weren't being orderly. And it was this whole controversy. Well, this is Erwin Ince, social justice warrior guy. And this has nothing to do with race issues or any of the woke stuff. This is literally soft pedaling Roman Catholicism in a PCA church. Now, whenever you think about Roman Catholicism, the older Presbyterians would never have gone for this. Like, I'm a little shocked to see even Erwin Ince going for this. I mean, letting a man who's saying, I am now with Rome, I'm convictionally, I've departed, right? I am now, which the PCA would say that Roman Catholic doctrine is heretical on certain levels. And now he's serving communion, the Lord's Supper, and they're sending him out. And it's a big fanfare. You know, I would think someone who did that, it's a scandal and you leave quietly, but that's not what it is. So that happened. Eric Erickson retweeted this, talk show host. He goes, it's not the local PCA that needs to be reviewed. It's the local presbytery that has allowed this church to fester. Now, I would say this. The PCA has taken it upon themselves to solve racism and now Christian nationalism. These are just issues that are so egregious. We need to do something about it. This needs to come before the General Assembly, and we need to have positions on these issues because if we don't, we're going to be overrun with whatever threats. And you know where are the threats? Who are the threats? I mean, is Stephen Wolf a threat? He's not even in the PCA. You know, who is it? It's just, they don't even have a video like this to show. If there's nothing like this at a PCA service, they can show to say we need to craft a policy for the entire PCA, but there they go ahead and do it. And on this issue though, oh, no, this is just a local thing. This isn't something the whole PCA. I'm just telling you, it's just funny to see the priorities, where the priorities line up. So Zachary Groff, who is he? I think he must be let's see. Is he a PCA pastor? Antioch PCA, I think he is. So he says, this morning at Grace Mosaic, one of the elders of Grace DC Network, inclusive of 3 constituent congregations under one session, shared a follow-up to last Sunday's debacle, my word, not his, involving Joel Littlepage's announcement, his defection to go to Rome. This elder gave the uncomfortable follow-up announcement with admirable winsomeness, but great nervousness, completely understandable. It seems to me that he was reading from a prepared notes. I don't envy this brother for the announcement, but it was unbelievable, and it was a scandalous claim. Here's what he said. We just wanted to make clear that Joel chose to make an announcement about his new theological commitments during the service without consulting or the knowledge of the elders, of those who participated in the service, including our friend Erwin, or the broad Grace DC leadership, including Pastor Glenn. I have some major problems with this, says Zachary. Apostasy is not new theological commitments, number one. And he goes on about that. Number two, it is my understanding that Joel has been treading water in the Tiber for quite a while, so they shouldn't have been shocked by it. Number three, regardless of what Erwin or the other attendees at Grace Mosaic said last week might have been expected when they went to church, what transpired should have stopped them in their tracks long before Joel blasphemed the words of the institution. If you've made it this far, let me say this without any equivocation, and he says this in bold. If a Presbyterian minister stands up and says he is giving up the pastoral ministry because he is becoming Roman Catholic, then do not receive the Lord's Supper from him. Right? It seems like a no-brainer, right? The Westminster Confession of Faith refers to, is it the Roman Catholic Church? I think it is, as the synagogues of Satan. Our confession continues, there is no other head of the church but the Lord Jesus Christ, nor can the Pope of Rome in any sense be a head thereof. So, this is the part of the follow-up that happened. And there was a few PCA things I noticed. Another thing was, I guess, at Kevin DeYoung's church up until recently, they had shepherdesses, and people were talking about that too. I don't even know what that means. It's kind of that's a weird term because shepherd is pastor, right? But the PCA is in trouble. I'll just put it that way. They're in trouble. And the trouble is going to be, I think the trouble is displayed depending on what battles they choose, where their priorities lie. If their priorities are, they want to get rid of all the quote unquote racists, and they have such an elastic definition of that, it would include it would include anyone who thinks that there's differences between peoples and talks about it. And they can't even come up with examples where this is happening in the PCA. It's just something we have to fight. If they, for years, it was like, it was pulling teeth to get them to really weigh in any substantial manner on the revoice stuff. Right. But, they'll crush federal vision real quick. I mean, I'm now taking the long view of the PCA. I think some of these things are threats. Actually, I mean, at the time I said, I actually think you could write something on race and make it biblical. Like, just make sure it's a biblical document that talks about that. We don't deny the Imago Dei, right? Everyone. I mean, there was a guy, I'm not even going to say his name because I don't want to give the guy free press, but there was a guy last week on X who's talking about basically insinuating minorities might not have the full extent of the Imago Dei. It's like, okay, you can biblically counteract that, right? And if someone wants to poetically, figuratively say that someone who's a criminal, which this wasn't, but they're less of a human, or they're not following God, and they're attacking the Imago Dei, or so like. But that wasn't what was being said. Make a biblical stand on those issues, sure, but they're bringing in just things that are not found in historic Presbyterian documents to fight current social threats or social issues that they see as threats, while this kind of thing's going on. This is a softening of doctrine when you have the director of your missions agency for North America giving an ovation to a man who just says he's defected to Rome. And I don't understand it. I mean, if Erwin Ince isn't right away take at the soonest available opportunity fired, then what do you even say about the PCA, right? It's just swallowing at gnats or straining at gnats and swallowing camels is all you can say. I think federal vision was something that needed to be looked into and so forth. But you know what? Revoice is kind of a big deal, right? Like I've been watching the PCA from a distance, but I have been sort of keeping an eye on it from afar, and I just am not impressed with the way that they deal with their problems. I understand there's bureaucracy, but boy, they seem to be pretty quick when it's something that they care about. Okay. I think that's the last thing before the Candace Owens stuff. So I'll take some questions, and then we will go into the Candace Owens stuff real quick. All right. There's not a lot of questions. So Cosmic Treason has some things. Let's see. Betty says, surprising to me, larger numbers of those calling themselves Christians that go to the Roman Catholic Church. It's always been happening, but I do think it is happening at greater numbers, and the Eastern Orthodoxy It is happening, I think, more so than it has before. John, don't know the PCA and Presbyterians generally let everyone in and then use security to kick out troublemakers, as Doug Wilson put it. Okay, let's talk about this clip.
This is how this country was founded, on a trumped up Reddit libertarian hissy fit that was not really all it was cracked up to be, but was the basis for a destructive and a self-harm story, a founding mythology of a country that ripped out the natural system of government that is supposed to obtain over man on earth and pulled God out of the system too. Is this my British coming out? I know.
No, I
can't even get through the whole clip. So let's just real quick handle some of the things he just said. A libertarian hissy fit, that was the founding of the United States. I don't think so. Do you think libertarians were interested in anything remotely connected to Christian moral constraints and Christian civilization? Because the founders sure were. They swam in those waters and they preserved those elements. So I don't know where. I mean, it wasn't libertarian. It was localist in the sense that you had the state and royal charters, state constitutions, assemblies, representative assemblies that had already formed in the colonies. And there was two levels of government. And you had one that was closer or nearer, and that one that was more distant. And the one that was more distant was the government in England. And so you had an ocean dividing the two. And when there became a conflict between the two, the question was one of jurisdiction. Which one were the colonists going to be loyal to? And there were those who were loyal to the crown. But remember, it was Parliament initially that the colonists had a problem with. It wasn't actually the king. The Olive Branch petition was an attempt to get the king to stop Parliament, because this was not the arrangement that they were used to. Parliament was changing the rules in their minds. Parliament was now taxing them and quartering troops and calling their legislatures to inconvenient locations and doing this all unconstitutionally. British Constitution is unwritten. It's based on tradition, basically. But they're doing all these things, and it wasn't theirs to do. These were the kinds of things that should be up to local approval. They had royal governors. They had local assemblies. They had a mechanism already for these kinds of things. And instead, they're being told from a distant government that they must accept these new, what they would see as innovations and oppressive measures. So, no, it wasn't a libertarian hissy fit. It was an attempt to go with the local governments over the faraway government, and King George did not intervene on their behalf. So they had a problem with the king. What else did he say that I wanted to address there? I can't remember, but they kicked God out of it. Where did they kick God out of it? I mean, where he's just throwing stuff out there to say stuff. I mean, the Declaration of Independence certainly mentions God. Where was God kicked out? All the state constitutions, the ones that were even revised in the years during and after 1776, they all of them mention God on some level. So what's he talking about? They kicked God out of it, as if this was a secular libertarian founding. No, it wasn't. Nothing like that. So that's just ignorant, and I don't know why Milo Yiannopoulos would say that. And I have nothing against Milo Yiannopoulos. I know about him from years ago, back when the alt-right was composed mainly of him and Richard Spencer. I haven't heard a lot from him in years. I've heard that he is not homosexual anymore. He has gone through some kind of a conversion therapy. I've heard that he's, I think, converted to some form of Christianity. I mean, I've heard these things, but he's not been as active. So I don't, or at least as known. So I don't know what's happened to him over the years, but that's not an accurate representation of the founding at all.
But there is something a little similar about the way this country was founded to what you're talking about, which might suggest why this country is so vulnerable and so is so susceptible to precisely this kind of psychological and political warfare, because it is how the nation knows itself. How it was born was in a fit of injustice that was corrected by a few brave men taking a stand. That's the whole story of America.
Okay, so I'm interested.
Okay. Is England, where he comes from, is Great Britain impervious somehow to manipulation and control. Do they? I mean, Great Britain seems to have a big issue with immigration, just like we do, except theirs seems to be worse in some regions. Great Britain has problems with being post-Christian beyond ours. Their official church, I mean, they're the defender of the faith, their king, the great monarchy that I assume Milo Yiannopoulos is all for here. It's the natural state of government, apparently. That great monarchy, that great defender of the faith, is now bowing to Allah with Muslims. So you don't lecture me on America, this and that, when Great Britain is farther gone. And it wasn't in the structure of Great Britain that wasn't able to defend them against what ended up happening. So please don't give me this.
Interested now, because this is going to bring us right into the occult and what they actually believe in, because you're right. The founding of America is an absolute myth.
Mm-hmm.
I just, Candace Owens, like, she's smiling with glee. It's like, this is just, it's like it's like her favorite topic. It's going to bring us right back into the occult. We're going to talk about the occult. And, you know, Candace Owens, I admire to some extent her bravery over the years. I think that she's gotten, maybe she always was. And because I never really listened. I've never listened to a whole episode of hers or anything, but, you know, maybe she's getting kind of nutty. Maybe she's just going to bad sources. I think what's happened, this is just my, from afar observations, is she has she has gone through a number of different conversions. Catholicism is one of them. She also has leaned in very hard into the question of Jewish negative influence, which I've just noticed guys who tend to, and girls, I guess, who tend to go down that path super heavy. They tend to get themselves into odd places. And I'm not saying there's not a conversation to have on the influence that successfully driven Jewish people have had in certain industries and so forth. But people who start making that the explanation for most things, as if it's an ideology, is like that to me is like that just gets you into very odd places. You start fitting everything into your ideology instead of letting the information speak for itself. And when you're talking about America, you don't even have heavy levels of Jewish immigration until starting in the 1880s. So the problems that we all have that go before that, which just about all of them do to some extent, we're coming along just fine without the participation of Jewish people. But this has now become kind of the key, right? And part of that is, I know because I've known people who've gone this direction, is the Masons. The Masons are a sort of one arm of world, quote unquote, Jewry, and the Masons control all these governments, and the Illuminati is another arm of that. In fact, they're connected. And so Candace goes through, I think part of it is her Roman Catholic conversion. She goes through these big changes in her life in a short period of time. And now she's just like, everything's a red pill. Everything that she once knew is all wrong. And she's now going to be the prophetess who comes to you and tells you about all the things she got wrong. But it's so fast. Like, she hasn't had time to actually digest the things she's reading. And the book she references here, I actually know about because I've read it. And that's when I think I decided to do this. I was like, oh, I know exactly what she's talking about. And it's bunk. It's historical garbage. But here's what it is. Here's the theory.
I'm actually
and
reading a book.
supported by the French.
But hold on. What is the book that I'm reading? The Secret Founding of America. I'm reading a book, and it's basically just blowing my mind. And it's telling me that everything you think you know is completely false. But when I was in study with some priests, they sort of pish-poshed me. You know, I was in England studying with some priests, and they were just sort of like, everything that you Americans think you know is so foolish. Like, America was obviously founded by Freemasons. And now I'm really understanding, like, yes, you had these Freemason lodges that came over, you know, the Scottish Rite, B'nai B'rith, and they...
Just real quick, the Scottish Rite didn't even come over until when? The 1820s or 30s? It wasn't even in existence in the United States. So, you know, that's not part of the founding at all.
They were the reason behind the Civil War. They were the reason, but they were literally fighting for control of America. And the way that they do this is very similar to what we're seeing today. There's this kind of mainstreamed lie. I mean, let's get the, if you ask Americans, oh, it was just the tea tax was too high. And this is what we did. We started throwing it out in the harbor, and we said, we're ready to go to war. Now that I say it, it sounds so stupid.
Sounds kind of dumb, don't it? Sounds kind of dumb.
Basic.
Like, I know it was a couple hundred years ago, but people were people.
What? How much is this tea cost? Oh no, Paul Revere, the British are coming. It's actually
just stop.
It's
just stop.
So childish.
And it's gay. It's gay. It's gay. It's gay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's gay, apparently, to believe that Paul Revere announcing the British were coming, the battles of Lexington and Concord, the skirmishes, they were battles, I guess you could say there, the Boston Massacre. I mean, I'm just talking about the Northeast. I'm not even talking about what happened in the South, but the things that were centered around Boston, which did not represent the entire country. In fact, Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry thought that the Boston Tea Party was terrible, that this was a bad thing. There were plans on how do we repay England for this tea. But this, to boil everything down to that, yeah, that would be kind of dumb, but that wasn't everything. That wasn't everything. That's part of the problem is if you have a cartoon of history, which many of us have been given as somewhat of a cartoon of history, it's very Northeastern centric and it only focuses on a few things. Then yeah, but maybe it is that and more so, more than that as well. Maybe it's also the fact that British soldiers were being quartered in people's houses. Maybe go read the Declaration of Independence, read all the grievances that the colonists had. And this was written by a Virginian, so this wasn't just unique to Boston or Massachusetts. Read everything that they had, the problems they had with the government in England. It went way beyond just a tea tax, right? And then, well, it wasn't even the only tax. You had the stamp tax, right? This is taking a straw man, knocking it down, and then saying, if that's not true, if that sounds far-fetched, then the other option is my option here, which it was all Freemasons. Right, it was all Freemasons. So let's go through a few things. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but Nicholas Hager's 2016 book, which Candace Owens is reading, called The Secret Founding of America. In that book, Hager posits that even the concepts like federalism were taken from Freemasonry by the founding fathers for the purpose of establishing a new world order. So the new world order has the globalist vision, has been there from the beginning. George Washington and all the rest, that they were behind it. It's insane, by the way. It's an insane accusation to make. It shows a lack of understanding of Freemasonry and a lack of understanding of the conditions that led to the War for Independence. But he's not the only one that's been saying these things. You have all sorts of conspiracy websites that, I mean, there's one called The Cutting Edge that maintains that Freemasonry has been guiding our nation's direction since 1776. This stuff is not new, and it's one of the reasons that I did my final paper in American, it was a Christian heritage, I forget, it was my grad school, one of my grad school courses. I decided to look into this because I kept hearing these things, and there's really weird claims that get thrown out there. Like, there's a guy named Alexander Holub who ties Masonry to occultism, which you saw Candace Owens do, and claims that 98% of the founding fathers were Masons. Well, that's not true at all either. So I'm going to bring you through just a little bit of history of this. Yes, Masonry started in Europe in the Middle Ages. It was trade guilds. That's what it was. It changed during the Enlightenment. And part of that was you had free trade. You didn't have the need for these guilds as much. And there was, the organization became more interested in what they call speculative Masonry. But this was also dependent on the region you were in. So one of the first places that you had this speculative masonry was London. London combined a few of the lodges into this one grand lodge. And so they were, it got a little more mystical and all of that. But Masonry, especially in the United States in the early years, was primarily Christian, in the sense that the people there even had to take oaths that were uniquely Christian. Early Masonry had oaths to the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It was Trinitarian. Obviously, that's changed. But if you don't understand that Masonry went through a number of developments, depending on region and time, then you're not telling the whole story. It's not one monolithic thing that always had this view of creating a new world order. So anyway, so operative Masonry, different than speculative Masonry. During the reign of Edward IV, the oldest Masonic motto was "God is our guide." In 1594, "In the Lord is all our trust." 1688, the Grand Lodge of England motto was "In the beginning was the Word, and holiness to the Lord." I mean, so these things, it wasn't always this occult stuff. That developed later. In 1723, the constitutions of the Masons stated that it was expedient only to oblige brothers to that religion in which all men agree. So you start seeing ecumenicism form. But George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, who were Masons, very low committal Masons, by the way. I mean, Benjamin Franklin's funeral, the Masons weren't even present to do anything there. George Washington went to a handful of meetings. Yes, he became a third-degree Mason, but at that time, you only had to attend 2 meetings, or 3, I suppose, in like a 6-month period. And Washington attended them when he was in the military. And that's how most people got involved, was when they were soldiers. And then he didn't go back for something like 30 years. He didn't have any, he himself would not let himself get painted in Masonic regalia. He had no attachment to it. That all those paintings are from later. So there, if you want to talk about a hoax being put on us, it's the hoax that says that these guys were believing all these crazy oaths, these blood oaths, and that they were the kind of Masonry they believed in was the kind of Masonry we have today, and that they were very involved in it. They weren't. But the oath that he took would have said, you must serve God, honor the king, and assist any brother by the contents of the sacred writ, that's scripture, so help you God. So you had Protestants in Masonry. It was a place for fraternization between the troops during the French and Indian War and then the War for Independence. The Roman Catholic Church condemns Masonry in 1738. There's an anti-Masonic bent in the Roman Catholic Church. Candace Owens has converted to Roman Catholicism. Now, there is also in Baptistic circles, by the way. In Anglican circles, which George Washington was an Anglican, there was a lot more acceptance of Masonry. But there were Baptists who were also Masons. Today, I would see that as a big problem. Back in George Washington's time, it was a different kind of Masonry, and especially Masonry in America was more of a social club. So anyway, during the French Revolution, the Illuminati is suspected of being involved in that. That this is where you get a lot of the accusations that Masons were behind that it was a Jewish organization and stuff. It's from the French Revolution. It's not from the American. It would, let's see, what do I want to cover? I'm sort of going through some of the high points in the paper I wrote. George Washington attended his first Masonic meeting in 1752. He was 20 years old. He went back twice. It looks like by the time of the Revolution, there was approximately 150 lodges in America. 10 military lodges were set up under George Washington in the Continental Army. At least 42% of the generals commissioned by the Continental Congress were Freemasons. So not even a majority. In any army made up of men from various regions, cultures, and denominations, Freemasonry forged bonds, not just between soldiers, but also between soldiers and their officers. So it was a place you could go, and you didn't have ranks anymore. You could fraternize with officers, which was an important thing for bonding. Let's see. So it was nothing more than a social charitable club in the at the turn of the 19th century, according to Attorney General William Ritt. And in 1749, Reverend Charles Brockwell preached from a pulpit of Christ Church in Boston that an upright Mason is under the strictest obligation to be a true Christian. And I have many quotes like this from the late 1700s of ministers even talking about and acknowledging Masons in their congregations, not seeing a conflict and so forth. Let's see. What else do I don't want to go through. I might do a whole podcast on this, so I don't want to give you everything right now. So here's an interesting figure. As many as 9 signers, which is 16% of the Declaration of Independence, and 18 signers, which is 25% of the Constitution, were Freemasons. So 16% of the signers of the Declaration were Freemasons. And you want to convince me it's a Freemason plot. That's kind of low. I'll be honest with you. That's kind of low. There's suspicions about the Great Seal of the United States. But here's the funny thing about the Great Seal of the United States. Yes, Benjamin Franklin is the only confirmed Mason in the group that formed it. He proposed a biblical image of Moses lifting up his hand and dividing the Red Sea. The Eye of Providence, according to the Journals of the Continental Congress, was meant to be a radiant triangle and central to the scene. After 3 committees looked at the proposal over the course of 6 years, Charles Thomson, Secretary of Congress and author of the Thomson Bible, was not a Mason, submitted the design modern Americans are familiar with. The pyramid was signified strength and duration and has been added by Francis Hopkinson, who was likewise not a Mason. It was not until 1797 that the all-seeing eye was first used as Masonic symbols. So that all-seeing eye predated Masons using it. You think that the dollar bill is a Masonic symbol. The historical record doesn't show it, guys. It's bunk. It's historical bunk. And it's ancient aliens kind of history. There's so much more. There's so much more. Yes, we did have an anti-Masonic party in this country. Yes, things changed in the 1800s. Yes, you did have the Scottish Rite come in. Yes, Masonry was delivered a big blow by the anti-Masonic party. Yes, the Morgan Affair of 1826 dealt a huge blow to Masonry. You had 228 lodges, for example, in New York, and then it was reduced to 45 by 1840. So Masonry was the influence it had. The high point of Masonry's influence was basically the 1830s and 1820s, 1830s, and then it did not play the same kind, did not have the same kind of influence. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know that Candace Owens is blowing smoke about this stuff. It does annoy me because it's like, you know, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you the real history because I read this ridiculous book. Candace Owens clearly does not know how to do primary source research. And I don't fault her necessarily for that. But what I am realizing is that more and more so, we have podcasters who are very good at presentation, who are very sure of themselves, and who have a good style. They have a good image that they can project. And people listen to them because of the way they use words, how they come across, but not because of the quality of their information. Because Candace Owens is giving you very bad quality information. You know, I think this is one of the things I got into a discussion with some guys about Nick Fuentes, who I don't really want to talk about that much, but I've suffered through a little bit of Nick Fuentes. So I can understand him and understand why people like him. And to me, it's empty rhetoric, right? If you look at his show, basically you have the formula for every show. At least everything I've seen, when you add in a few elements. How many times does Nick mention himself or his audience and their superiority, right? That seems to be the focal point of the show, like where we have an in-group and we're better than everyone. We're on the cutting edge. We know this. We have the inside scoop. It's sort of like a Gnostic knowledge you get when you listen to him. How many times when his back is up against a wall, is it just, you didn't get the joke? You didn't understand my angle. I'm playing 4D chess here. I'm just so much smarter than you. And everything routes back into that. I'm just smarter. Or he goes ad hominem. Those are his only two moves. He just starts making fun of the person, right? And that alone should convince you that he is right. And so the standard now for truth is, the standard for whether he's believable is how many zingers can he get in? And if you have the gift of gab, if you're a good rhetorician, if you are someone who has a smooth way of talking, which doesn't impress me that much, impresses me a little, but it doesn't impress me that much, then you can get away with all those things. It's the presentation that matters. It's not the quality of the information. I do believe as Christians, we should make good presentations when we're going to present things, but we ought to have and prioritize more so good quality information. That should be the hallmark, and we should know what to look for. We should not have firm, strong opinions on things because we heard someone's rhetoric. If we're not sure, we should look into it. It doesn't always take that much time, by the way. With this thing Candace Owens said, it wouldn't take you that long looking into it to realize something's wrong with what she's saying. Take some time, do some research before committing to a view. My fear is that on social media, the news cycles are so short. What ends up happening is we never fully digest and come to a conclusion on an issue before we make a decision about what we believe. And we do it based upon what we think is common sense, what we feel as we're listening to someone. Are they telling the truth? Are they not? They seem like they're honest, right? Those are the things that are hitting us. And it's more dangerous in a video medium or an audio medium than it is on printed medium. It's actually better to read things. I'm not saying you can't use it. Obviously, you're listening to my podcast here. I think there's the spoken word obviously is important in preaching. But when you have a written medium, you take time to digest. You're not getting the inflections in the voice that can also be persuasive. You're just getting the raw information. And you have to make a choice based on the information. Now, you're getting some of the rhetoric, but it's less. And that's what we need more of, is people who are able to listen, know what questions to ask, know how to go back to primary sources, and not just take someone's word for it because they have an incentive to believe something. There are incentives to cast asunder everything that you've been taught growing up because you don't believe the people who told it to you. You don't think they have your best interest. That's understandable. Don't just cast everything aside, though, simply because you don't like the people who told you it. Make sure that you have good reasons and then cast it aside if you need to, right? But there's not going to be a simple answer to every issue. You can't become an expert on everything either. And most things don't require you weighing in. But I do think the founding of your country, that's kind of a big deal. It does confer identity, and you should probably know a little something about it. And so be a student of history. That's, I guess, my encouragement. So that's kind of the podcast. And I said I wanted to end on an encouraging note. The encouraging note is this. We are on an adventure. We are on a series of adventures in this life. And I think right now in particular, there's so much up in the air. There's like I said at Michael Foster's conference a few weeks back, there's so much opportunity right now to get the true narrative out there because a Pandora's box is open. Anything goes. Any explanation someone has, as long as they have a microphone, which most people do, they can broadcast it. So you have an opportunity to broadcast the truth on your social media, in your community, at your church, with your children, whatever the platform God's given you. You have an opportunity to get that view out there. And I do think people are more open than they've ever been. Now, whether people actually move towards the Bible and Christianity, that still remains to be seen. I'm cautiously optimistic about that. I hope Barna's wrong. People were dismissing Barna in my chat, and I hope they're wrong about that. But I think there's tremendous opportunity. But there's also tremendous opportunity for lies. Both the lies and the truth are equally being elevated. So we going to be people of the truth? God put us here for such a time as this. So get out there and make sure the truth is what you put out there, what you signal, what you give boosts to. Don't just buy into lies, right? Take things with a grain of salt, do the research, and do your due diligence. And if we are people of the truth, if we are solid, if we don't let people down because our particular theories and the way that we view the world actually can undergo a stress test, then we will gain credibility. Christians will gain credibility. And we have the advantage of having a Bible, having a word of God that actually does go through the stress test. And it is successful in every test that you can give it. So that's the podcast for today. God bless. More coming.